Switching gears for now, there is a growing storm in the global trade and diplomatic landscape. And at the center of it is U.S. President Donald Trump. From American farms to foreign policy to trade disputes and Ukraine's war, the American president is locked in a multi-front battle in a way. First, the soybean standoff. President Trump has made it clear soybeans will top the agenda when he meets the Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month. In a post on Truth Social, Trump blamed Beijing for desperately holding off on American soybean purchases for negotiating reasons. He says U.S. farmers are paying the price. China, in fact, was once the top buyer of U.S. soybeans. It has now pivoted sharply. In August, Chinese imports of soybeans hit a new record with over 12 million tons. But most of that did not come from the U.S. Nearly 85% of it was sourced from Brazil. And as Beijing increasingly turns to South America to meet its demand and ramp up the pressure in the ongoing trade talks with Washington. But trade is just one piece of the puzzle here. Across the world, President Trump is watching closely as India and China continue buying Russian oil in defiance of the Western sanctions. President Putin is expected to visit New Delhi in early December for a summit with Prime Minister Modi. And this meeting coming amid strained U.S.-India ties due to Washington's 25% tariffs on Indian goods. It's a geopolitical triangle that's leaving Washington increasingly isolated and also frustrating Donald Trump and his efforts to bring economic and diplomatic pressure to bear. And as the trade talks with China loom, the Ukraine war drags on, Trump finds himself facing a rather tough truth. Soybeans, sanctions, shifting alliances are now deeply intertwined, and countries like India, China and Russia are showing no signs of backing down.
I've been on the data annotation platform for about 1.5 years now, and it's honestly been so amazing.
Anti-government demonstrations in Morocco turned violent on the fifth night as the protesters holding those demonstrations over the state of public services, and they resulted in widespread destruction. 2 people were killed when officers opened fire on a group of people attempting to storm a police station there as the violent protests roiled the North African country. According to a government-run news agency, police near the coastal city of Agadir were compelled to use their service weapons in self-defense to fend off an assault on their station. Images have emerged showing a bank branch in flames and several vehicles, including one belonging to the law enforcement, reduced to charred remains in the sale. In fact, this was in a neighborhood located north of Rabat in Morocco. The destruction marking a dramatic escalation as the country enters its 5th consecutive day of protests. Hundreds of masked teenagers were witnessed torching cars, banks and shops while smashing windows. Similar unrest reported in the south and east regions as well, where a police vehicle rammed into the demonstrators, leaving 1 person injured. The protests are spreading to new areas, underscoring growing anger over what the participants call rampant corruption and neglect of schools and hospitals. In fact, the Interior Ministry has said 409 people were arrested since the protest started on Saturday, with 263 security forces injured, along with 23 civilians. The authorities have said 142 police vehicles and 20 private cars were damaged. The so-called Gen Z protests, driven largely by internet-savvy youths, emerging as the country's largest in years. Protesters have been demanding urgent reforms in the country's public health and education sectors, which have long been points of contention. The protesters highlighted the stark contrast between the government's billions spent on World Cup preparations and the dire condition of public services. Morocco is preparing to host the Africa Cup of Nations this year and the 2030 World Cup, while the parliamentary elections loom in 2026. Officials have denied prioritizing stadiums over services, but the protests have put the spotlight on some disparities and the so-called disillusionment among the youth. And this protest also following similar youth-led large-scale demonstrations in Nepal, Indonesia, the Philippines and Madagascar. Amnesty International urged the Moroccan authorities to address the protesters' legitimate demands for social and economic rights. Shifting focus for now, Pakistan's senator has launched an attack on Field Marshal Asim Munir inside the parliament. He ridiculed the army chief over his recent trip to Washington, accusing him of behaving less like a military leader and more like a store salesman. Not just that, he mocked Asim Munir for offering rare earth minerals to US President Donald Trump, questioned his mandate, and also stated that the meeting between Munir and Donald Trump undermined Pakistan's democracy. Listen to this.
हमारा चीफ ऑफ द आर्मी स्टाफ बाहर घूम रहे और ब्रीफकेस में रेयर यार व्हाट अ जोक. ये मजाक था. वो तस्वीर जिसने भी देखी, कौन सा चीफ ऑफ द आर्मी स्टाफ ब्रीफकेस में रेयर अर्थ मिनरल लेके जाएगा, और वो मुझे एक बेहतरीन ब्रांड स्टोर लग रहा था जिसमें एक मैनेजर खड़ा बड़ा खुशी खुशी देख रहा था. एक दुकानदार बायर को कह रहे कि आ जाओ मेरे पास बड़ी अच्छी चीजें, ये खरीद लो. किस मुआहदे के तहत, किस कानून के तहत, किस आइन के तहत? ये तो डिक्टेटरशिप है. दिस इज सॉरी टू से नॉट डेमोक्रेसी.
And earlier on social media, the senator sharpened his criticism with sarcasm, comparing the photo of Munir, Trump and Sharif to an elite designer shop. Not just that. In fact, he is no stranger to politics. He heads the Awami National Party in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and carries a powerful legacy as the grandson of Pashtun leader and the great-grandson of Abdul Ghaffar Khan, known widely as the Frontier Gandhi. Ghaffar Khan was a major figure of India's freedom struggle, remember, who stood firmly by Mahatma Gandhi's ideals of non-violence and civil resistance and was involved in the civil disobedience movement, the Quit India movement and other freedom struggles against the British Raj. And that lineage seemed to be evident as the senator took on Pakistan's most powerful institution inside parliament. And this was not the first international engagement for the Field Marshal, of course. Munir has already made 3 visits to the White House since India carried out Operation Sindoor against terror camps inside Pakistan. And following that operation, Islamabad credited Trump for brokering a ceasefire and even pushed his name for the Nobel Peace Prize. New Delhi, however, has clearly dismissed those claims, insisting that the ceasefire was settled directly between India and Pakistan without US mediation.
Excuse me, how many languages do you speak?
I speak 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French.
Okay, let's test that. ¿Qué hace normalmente los domingos?
Duermo hasta tarde, de cena tranquilamente, y pasa el día viendo series en Netflix.
C'est quoi ton moyen de transport préféré?
Je préfère marcher si ne pleut pas.
Nice! How'd you become so good at Spanish and French as an English native?
I actually got access to the Pimsleur app to try it out, and it's seriously different from other apps.
How so?
Well, other apps just teach you vocabulary and keep you clicking streaks. But Pimsleur actually got me speaking from day one. It's conversation-based, so I learned during my commute. Honestly, I learned way more than I ever did just tapping on a screen.
Tell me more about it. I'm preparing for a Euro trip this summer and need this.
So their method is based on Dr. Pimsleur's science, something called graduated interval recall. It's used by the FBI and State Department to train agents to learn a new language quickly.
That is so cool. And when did you use it the most?
That's the cool part. It's all audio-based, so I can practice while I'm making breakfast, cooking, or doing laundry. And whenever I'm driving, I just connect it to my car, whether it's Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and speak out loud like I'm actually in a conversation, which is super convenient.
Okay, that's genius. I'm downloading it right away.
You definitely should. They have a free lesson with 51 languages to try, so go for it.
What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make, quote unquote. Those words by Jane Goodall describe the many ways in which she indeed made a difference. The conservationist, scientist, global activist, chimpanzee expert, environmental advocate has passed away at the age of 91. Goodall turned her childhood love of primates into a lifelong quest for protecting the environment. She was known for her groundbreaking, immersive chimpanzee field research, in which she documented their distinct personalities and use of tools. She died of natural causes while in California on a speaking tour. She was a pioneer in her field, to say the least, both as a female scientist in the 1960s and for her work studying the behavior of these creatures. She created a path for a string of other women to follow suit. She also drew the public into the wild in a way, partnering with the National Geographic Society to bring her beloved chimps into their lives through film, TV and magazines. The pictures of her heartwarming moments spent with these animals in the wilderness are iconic, to say the least. In 1977, she set up the Jane Goodall Institute, a non-profit organization aimed at supporting the research as well as conservation and development efforts. The work has since expanded worldwide and includes efforts to tackle environmental education, health, advocacy. Quoting, "Out there in nature by myself, when you are alone, you can become part of nature and your humanity does not get in the way," quote unquote. This is what she told the Associated Press in 2021. Among the many statements that describe her special bond with nature and the remarkable dedication she had for the cause, Goodall in her later years devoted decades to education and advocacy on humanitarian causes and protecting the natural world. She was known for balancing the grim realities of the climate crisis with a sincere message of hope for the future. Tributes from around the world, from animal rights organizations, political leaders, admirers, have been pouring in following the news of her death. Her work was aimed at inspiring hope, because where there is hope, there is action. And may this be a reminder of the way in which you can make a difference and keep up with the hope and act at the same time. Goodall's work is an inspiration, and her work will continue to inspire generations to come.